Truth, logic, action, power. It's the GreggHoush Show here on New Revolutionary Radio. From the Leonard School in Malden, Massachusetts, Gregg and company are here to bring a sense of ethics to your news. Whether it's politics, activism, or current events, we always seek to inform and never to deceive. Let's start the show.
Welcome to episode 32 of the GreggHoush Show.
It's Indictment Week. Yay!
Starring me.
Your name is on the show.
And my wonderful co-hosts, including the amazing Kayla.
That's me.
Mac.
It's the Mac Daddy. It's the back and Mac. He's the Mac and cheesiest. He's the Mac truck coming your way. He's Mac-tastic.
And, of course, Anna's joining us this time again. This time, instead of joining us halfway through the episode, we started so late that she's here at the beginning.
It's the alt Gregg.
I'm not alt Gregg this week. I'm my own person. I'm a real human, guys.
Yeah, I think this week, since I'm in the room, she's not going to call me a bitch, so that's good.
Oh, no,
right?
she definitely will.
On my own show, I love it.
I expect more of you getting called a bitch by her, honestly.
It was one time, guys. One time.
So it's a low standard to expect more.
And also,
this is why, every time I have, long conversations with her in front of people, everyone looks at me with that look like, wow. You know?
I do, and I love it every minute of it. I'm like, she sounds like a smart lady.
You hate white men, though.
Yeah, but I just hate men a lot.
That's true. I mean,
I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but men are kind of awful right now. Real awful.
I hear calling men trash is a bad move on Facebook, though, so let's be careful.
And calling men scum, because right the week after I got kicked off, one of my comedian friends got kicked off for Facebook for 30 days for calling men scum. Saying women are scum,
amazing.
Though, however, totally fine on Facebook.
You know what else is fine on Facebook? Indictment Week!
Yes, so this week we are going to be talking about indictments and our
It's the one time where indictments are a great thing.
Mac here has decided that he could whittle the information down to no smaller than 11 pages for this week. I think 8 or 9 of them are for the indictments alone. And,
yeah, pretty much.
To be fair, the indictment for Manafort and Gates was about 34 pages.
True.
I don't know how many pages the Papadopoulos indictment was. So 8 or 9 pages is actually whittling it down.
There's a bunch of stuff here that's not just strictly the indictments.
Yeah, so 10 pages is kind of a synopsis of the whole thing.
Oh, I could have written an entire book. Seriously, there is so much material I just had to exclude.
Oh, I'm sure
just
many people are writing books right now.
Yes.
Oh, I bet there are.
Mac, are you aware that it's November?
Oh, yeah. But that doesn't really count because it's not a novel.
Look, you can write something that isn't a novel during National Novel Writing Month.
It's novel November.
Did you just listen to what you said?
So, no MacBook today. So, since Mac just did all this wonderful research and gave us all of these notes to go through, we're going to let him start kind of breaking this down for us, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot of us cutting him off randomly.
Yes.
So here we go, Mac.
It's the Mac Down. It's a new segment where Mac breaks it down.
I mean, you started off with Vetselnitskaya, of course, which we all now know how to pronounce, which is a miracle.
We got some new news from the New York Times on the 27th about interviews and records showing that Natalia Veselnitskaya met with Russian prosecutor Yuri Chaika in the months before, Prosecutor General, the lead prosecutor for the entire country of Russia, Yuri Chaika, in the months before her meeting in Trump Tower. Now, we'd previously established, of course, that they had a personal relationship, knew each other. There was definitely some connections there, but knowing that she had actually talked with him about the memo that she brought, the one that the Trump people all denied existed, and it turned out that this memo was almost identical to one that Chaika's office had delivered to Dana Rohrabacher, that is the Republican congressman from California, who is widely known to be very, very pro-Russia and is the one that was, had Republican leadership suggesting was maybe paid by Russia, although they then claimed that was a joke. But that memo had been sent 2 months earlier to Dana Rohrabacher's office with a stamp saying confidential. And the memo alleged that the Ziff Brother Investments, which is a firm owned by 3 billionaires, 2 of whom are major Democratic donors, had illegally purchased shares of a Russian company and evaded tens of millions of dollars of Russian taxes. So this is basically, if it is essentially, the gist is that this was clearly the memo being referred to in the emails. It's pretty obvious that that's what it was. Now, Veselnitskaya, of course, has continually claimed that she was acting without any coordination with the Russian government, hadn't talked to anyone, didn't acknowledge the fact that this memo had come from, or had been coordinated with Chaika's office. But also, Russian analysts say there is no way in hell she would have bypassed her own government to deliver official allegations, which these are official allegations that have been published on the Prosecutor General's website, to an American presidential campaign. So that just blows all kinds of holes in
That's
so
how
many
you
of
end
the
up dead in
stories.
Russia.
Oh, yeah.
So can I just boil that down to one sentence? Because you started talking and I was in and out a little bit.
Fair enough.
It sounds like this person had actual for realsies dirt on Democratic donors. Well, for realsies looking at least, yeah?
Yes. At least superficially real appearing.
Found real dirt or real looking dirt and handed it over to people on Trump's campaign.
And they used a cutout that wasn't technically part of the Russian government, and then everyone involved lied about it nonstop. Yeah, that's basically it. So that was before we got to the news that a federal grand jury had approved the first charges resulting from the Mueller investigation, which of course we found out on Friday the 28th. And the first of those were unsealed on Monday the 30th, indicting Paul Manafort and his partner Rick Gates, who was also his right-hand man. And later that afternoon, another statement of offense, which is slightly different from an indictment.
The indictment was unsealed along with the plea agreement because you have to indict before you can police.
Right, but the important part was the statement of offense, which was the thing that was
the plea agreement. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is essentially like an indictment, except it's what happens after that when you plead guilty and acknowledge all the wrongdoing.
And shocker, it's a guy no one's even heard of before.
Yeah, people have heard of him occasionally, but he's a bit on the obscure side.
Because Papadopoulos is everyone has a Papadopoulos in their state or city where they're like, isn't that what's his face?
George Papadopoulos, this guy that who has pled guilty, was mentioned occasionally, but he was a pretty minor figure up until now.
Sorry, off subject, but just kind of relevant in name. There's a Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ruling that changed our snow laws, and that it's Papadopoulos v. Target.
I just
No
always
relation,
think of the old TV show Webster when I think of Papadopoulos. So,
I think of C-Lab 2021 and Queen Doppelpopoulos.
Yes, Queen Doppelpopoulos.
I'm a bad person because I really bad Godzilla.
See, everyone thinks of a different Papa.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, so we got the announcement on Monday in 2 batches of these first set of indictments. Well, maybe. There are still 4 indictments that are sealed with case numbers between these sets of indictments. So there may be more indictments as part of this batch that simply haven't been unsealed. But more
Because they're still cooperating.
Indeed. But between the first and second announcements, we got some comedy gold as the administration started trying to do damage control, with Trump tweeting, "Sorry, but this is years ago before Paul Manafort was part of the Trump campaign. But why aren't crooked Hillary and the Dems the focus?" Followed by, "Also, there is no collusion!"
All caps.
And of course, around the same time, we had a source close to the administration telling CNN, quote, "Today has zero to do with the White House," end quote. And Trump's celebrity attorney, Jay Sekulow, told Wolf Blitzer the charges were about, quote, "business activities, not campaign events." And then in a press briefing that day, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders asserted that, quote, "Look, today's announcement has nothing to do with the president, has nothing to do with the president's campaign or campaign activity." And shortly thereafter, we got the Papadopoulos indictment unsealed. So there are, trying to explain what actually happened here. We know that we have Paul Manafort, who has been in the news a fair bit. And he and his partner were charged with a combined total of 12 counts of a number of federal crimes, which were in fact related to their work in the Ukrainian elections and not specifically regarding the 2016 election.
Well, one of the charges is conspiracy against the United States.
Well, that's any charge. The conspiracy against the United States is actually effectively conspiracy to defraud the United States.
I know, but it just sounds
Oh,
funny.
it sounds
it's
so
just,
much
it's just
worse,
so funny because
but-
you're like, it's not really to do with it. I'm like, I don't know. It's against the entire United States.
Well, I mean, to be fair, any federal crime you commit is a crime against the United States. So,
But it's just funny
Oh,
when it's
yeah,
for,
no,
when
it's
it's
a great-
when it's Manafort.
like,
I've shown
Yeah.
her like a piece of my paperwork from when I went to court for all of my wonderful fun I had as my teenage years, and just the top where it has the United States of
V,
America
Well, it's and
versus
V, yeah,
Gregg
defendant.
Housh.
Yeah, it's always
And
funny.
it's kind of scary to see that at the top of a document.
Oh, yeah, and that's how you can tell when it's like a federal crime too. It's like it's just funny when I had one time on Facebook where like someone was like trying to like brag about like their nickname where like their blue eyes or something like that. So he took a screenshot of like a federal indictment that said like I think it was like something like in quotes it said blue eyes. They were like, wow, federal indictment much?
Yeah.
Like great nickname, bro.
Yeah.
So Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, his right-hand man and partner, got 12 counts between them. The charges were almost identical. Essentially, the charges were conspiracy against the United States, conspiracy to launder money, failure to file reports of foreign bank and financial accounts, unregistered agent of a foreign principal, false and misleading statements on their declaration of being the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and false statements made. The only difference between the two is that Paul Manafort got an additional count of failure to file reports because he didn't do it for an extra year.
I think one of them is linked to obstruction of justice, like, or potentially.
Yeah, that would be the false statements.
Okay, yeah.
Now, Paul Manafort faces a statutory maximum of 80 years in prison for all this, but federal sentencing guidelines suggest about 15 years if he's found guilty on all the counts, which for a 68-year-old man is effectively a life sentence. Rick Gates is...
Well, it depends on how they're sentenced. So, like, if they're sentenced, if they're concurrent or if they're like combined, it depends. Like, you have to do a minimum percentage.
Yeah, I think that this is actually the 15 years is according to the Mueller team. So I believe that accounts for everything.
Okay, so
80
that would
years
be like
is the statutory maximum.
so like
if they were all
15 would be
separate
the
and everything.
minimum. Yeah. Oh God.
So
What a fucking idiot.
yeah, and
Crazy.
Rick Gates is pretty much equally fucked here. He is younger and got the one less count, but he's still looking at about a decade in prison if he gets hit on all
I
counts.
was
And
very surprised by the bail because technically, I know I'm saying this like with if logic and reason still existed in the world, so technically bail is only revoked or set in one if you have to prove one of two things to like get not get bail. You're either a flight risk or a danger to the public. Well, Paul Manafort clearly has the means and the money to be a flight risk. So I was very shocked that bail was even set.
let's talk about
He's
that for a second.
he's under heightened home. So with he's going to get the bracelet and they're going to do the guard, right?
I
But
believe.
I mean,
that is
I
correct.
was still very shocked by that
Oh yeah,
because
he can afford to get out of the country
Yeah.
Well, let's-
legally or not.
Let's talk about this for a second, because it so happens that part of the reason they thought he was a flight risk is because for some reason Paul Manafort had 3 valid passports.
yeah, that came out like the day, like what?
There is a-
You're
was
only
it
supposed to
yesterday?
have 2.
Yeah, there is a valid legal reason why you can get 2. It has to do with if you're traveling overseas and you have to send off your passport in advance to get a visa, and then while your passport is gone, you need to travel to another country that also where you don't need to get a visa in advance, but you have to show your passport on entry. Alternatively, there's also cases where there are countries where if you've entered one country, there's another country that will never let you in.
Or if you have dual citizenship.
Well, yeah, but you don't get 2 U.S. passports for that.
No, but you could just have 2 passports.
Right.
So.
But
Right.
we're talking. Also, he'd applied for 10 passports in as many years.
10 passports, 10 years.
So
Mind
he
you,
had
passports are
3
good for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's
seems a little odd.
Shady as hell,
No,
definitely.
actually, no, because that's normal. I know people that's normal. For 10 years?
For whom is that normal?
Applying for 10 different passports? What are you losing
no,
them?
No, one passport good for 10 years?
Yeah, that's always
Yeah.
the case.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Yeah, but he's
But
applied
he was
for
applying for
one
them
per year.
on average, one per year, despite that.
Okay.
He applied for 10 of them in 10 years.
Incidentally,
That is not good.
Valentina Meehan, the owner of New York-based passport and visa expediting service Passport Plus, was quoted as saying, quote, "Having 3 U.S. passports is incredibly unusual and normally would raise a red flag," end quote. Oh, yeah, that obvious flight risk, it is just the most unsubtle flight risk ever.
Yeah, because it's like we're not even talking like commercial flights. Like he would have his own private flight.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it's like I was very shocked, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's such a high bail." I'm like, I'm surprised he was given bail at all. Like
Yeah.
that guy has all the means in the world to be able to leave and jump ship. Like
This guy would have an easier time running away than Snowden did, and Snowden managed to run away.
yeah. So I'm very shocked.
Not only that, though, it actually ggets worse.
No, shocker!
Right?
It gets worse.
But I mean, if you look, there's so much here, but the fact that he spent all this time in Ukraine working for the puppet government there, from
Suppressing the people and keeping the puppets in power,
yes,
which only
know-
benefits the Russians.
yes, let's go. We've talked about this a bit in the past, but let's review a little bit because there are some new details that came up actually. So these charges are all related to his work in Ukraine between 2006 and 2014, although some of the money laundering charges are related to events through 2017. Now,
Because he made so much, there was still a lot of laundering to
oh
do.
yeah, there was a lot of laundering going on there. Now, this, of course, involved lobbying work for the Russian puppet government under Viktor Yanukovych and the Party of Regions in Ukraine. And what we found out recently is that they concealed their activities by having their lobbying activities done as clients of the European Center for a Modern Ukraine, which was an organization operating out of Belgium, was created in 2012, and was purely a mouthpiece for the Party of Regions, and in fact ceased to operate effectively when the Yanukovych government fell in 2014.
It only existed to help with the puppeting.
Yes, expressly. Now,
Yes, I've always hated puppets. I'm not gonna lie. They've always been creeping me out. Like I've never trusted them. Like puppets are they're creepy.
and the center was used as a front for hiring American-based lobbying firms, the Podesta Group and Mercury Public Affairs, to have them lobby on behalf of this puppet government while pretending that they were working for this other client and not actually foreign agents working on behalf of a government. Now, Ron Teresian, the CEO of another such firm, 5WPR, told Business Insider and showed them emails from 2012 about this, that he was approached by these guys who wanted to hire him to do a PR campaign, quote, for billionaires and the Ukrainian government, end quote, and discussed getting around filing as foreign agents and asking him if he had a problem with being paid from offshore accounts, saying they made way more money offshore than in the US. There's also some evidence suggesting that the Podesta Group and Mercury Public Affairs at least had some idea of who they were really working for, or at a bare minimum knew that they weren't being told the whole picture. So there may be some trouble there for them.
I feel like asking the question, "Do you mind getting paid from offshore accounts?" kind of opens up the door to there might be some trouble here.
Yeah, and I should mention here that the fact of the matter is that this makes it just so much more likely that he's going to flee, because all of these crimes are crimes that don't require any witnesses to prove. You can prove them all just from documentation. The fact that they are charging him and Rick Gates for these crimes means they are pretty screwed. It is really hard to fight these charges.
They haven't approved.
$75 million of money laundering. Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
Well, 75 million was in the overseas accounts, and 18 million that Manafort alone laundered into the U.S.
Through the condo sale, right?
Yeah,
No, multiple sales.
through many
Multiple
things,
sales, okay.
many
Yeah,
things,
he-
including buying expensive rugs, buying real estate, all
Antique
kinds.
rugs, like really, like is like tops, like it's
Crazy.
like
That is
like,
crazy.
That part like really like made me giggle because I'm like, what the fuck is an antique rug?
So
So interest the mention of real estate here is very interesting because one of the LLCs that is accused of being
One of the many.
Yes, there are about
John
30 of them.
Hanna LLC.
Yes, and that is named for the middle names of Manafort and his partner in the company, Rick Davis. Now,
like, way to be subtle about it.
yeah. Now, that happened to be the LLC that purchased a condo in Trump Tower in 2006, the year Manafort made his $10 million a year contract with Oleg Deripaska, and the year that he started working for Yanukovych. That condo in Trump Tower was paid for in cash, or at least without a mortgage, paid full and upfront, just bought outright
Yeah, that's how
by
you. That's
this
how,
LLC, and that is the place that Paul Manafort lives. In fact, the property was transferred to him a few years ago now.
yeah, if you've got a $10 million condo, you always pay in cash. That's a normal thing that
Yeah,
people do.
who doesn't need a mortgage for that?
That's
Especially when you just started a $10 million a year contract for a Russian oligarch and working for a puppet government of Russia.
I mean, like, it doesn't raise any red flags. I mean, especially when the man looks and sounds like a vampire. Like, that's a completely normal thing to happen.
Now,
Well, yeah, we can talk about, the man himself, and we don't even have to use our own words
that's
because
true.
his daughters were texting people and
Each other.
and we have those texts, and those have come out, and there's some great ones. Like this one, after Manafort resigned on August 19th, one daughter texted to a contact, quote, "So I got to the bottom of it. As I suspected, my dad resigned from being the public face of the campaign, but is still very much involved behind the scenes. He felt he was becoming a distraction and that would ultimately take a toll on the campaign."
Now, I just want to note that it was already known that even after Manafort had officially left the campaign, although it had been widely rumored that he was still active behind the scenes, his right-hand man, Rick Gates, this other guy that was charged, stayed involved in the campaign. That is public knowledge.
So that's on another occasion, on April 7th, one daughter texted another saying, "Dad and Trump are literally living in the same building, and Mom says they go up and down all day long, hanging and plotting together." And the other called Manafort and Trump perfect allies. And that's not even damning. I mean, what's really damning is this text from 2015 in which one of the daughters texted the other that their father, quote, "has no moral or legal compass," end quote. Quote, "Don't fool yourself. That money we have is blood money. You know he has killed people in Ukraine, knowingly as a tactic to outrage the world and get focus on Ukraine. Remember when there were all those deaths taking place a while back, about a year ago? Revolts and whatnot? Do you know whose strategy that was to cause that, to send those people out and get them slaughtered?" That's his daughters talking about him.
Yeah, he is.
Sounds like a swell family.
Right? Now,
I wonder what they're doing for Thanksgiving.
I feel like it probably involves,
I would like to go to the Manafort family Festivus.
oh,
Because
the
after
airing of
these-
grievances.
After these texts came out, I'm going to say that had to be amazing.
I wonder who leaked them.
they were apparently hacked. Someone got into their iCloud account
Yep.
and got all of their texts for years and put all of them on the dark web.
I bet you their password was like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, or like
The-
Daddy
the
loves
funny
money.
thing is, it was originally speculated that no one was really sure if these were legit or not, and then Paul Manafort himself confirmed that his daughters had gotten hacked and confirmed the authenticity of some of the texts.
Oh wait, so he's just incriminated himself further?
Because he's an idiot. Yes.
How are these the dumbest criminals ever?
well,
I mean,
you catch the dumb ones first.
Like, but the indictment goes for like over a decade.
How do people this stupid end up with $10 million a year contracts?
And
Like,
The
Yeah.
world is unfair and bullshit.
how
No, I mean, I'm just wondering, like, not from that point, just how were they smart enough to get the contract? Like, let alone like feed themselves in the morning. Like, I mean,
That's
I
a
don't.
valid
That's
point.
what I'm not understanding.
Yeah, see, you still have a certain level of like sense that there's fairness in the world. Like you have to be smart to be able to do these things. Like no,
And all of our
don't.
evidence is showing that no, you can be a
don't.
complete idiot.
And you know what's so baffling about this? Like when this whole scandal kind of started, and we kind of knew that like Russia was like at least influenced by social media, whether or not it was state sanctioned, it was still up in the air. Like I was willing to like kind of see the benefit of the doubt. Like I honestly did not think it was going to be this black and white.
Yeah, this is way worse.
I thought it
than-
was going to be like troll farms and like maybe a Putin sponsored like business because Putin controls everything in Russia. Like you know, like, but I didn't think it was going to be this stupid.
There is so much, and it is so blatant. And we found out things like Paul Manafort was of interest to law enforcement regarding all of his shady activities since 2014.
Yeah, that we did know when, like, because he's been under, like, he's been had a FISA
No,
warrant
we knew
against
that there
him.
was the FISA warrant, but like law enforcement was looking at him for the money laundering, financial crime stuff.
Yeah, I remember reading about that like earlier this year when like it was like first starting to come about that like Manafort was like kind of the subject. Because the other thing too, like wasn't it like it was a Ukrainian like that went to the DNC. It was like,
Yes.
hey, Manafort's a really fucking shady piece of shit.
And then there was the black book in Ukraine where they found all the black ledger that had all
Yeah.
the accounts that had all
After
of,
Manafort had to basically flee the Ukraine and the puppet government was out, there were a lot of government buildings that got ransacked that the new government went through and were like, what's all this that we're finding?
I think
And-
this one was actually a new client that like rented out his old office, and they just
Yeah.
ran across a box of stuff left behind.
Well, what we've got now is we've got the current PM of the Ukraine saying, if there's anything you're specifically looking for that you can give us a little help with so we understand what you need, we can search for it then, because we'll give you anything we can find.
Remember, of course, that Paul Manafort initially insisted that the black ledger was completely fraud, faked, nothing, not real, and then we started confirming details from it. Oops.
Yeah.
So as a result, we actually got a very interesting thing out of all of this, specifically related to Manafort. Well, Manafort and Gates, because on the 2nd of October, we now know.
That was the day before my birthday, by the way.
Well, you know, this was a birthday present for you, obviously, because it's specifically legal related even.
Yeah.
Anyway, Chief Judge Beryl Howell of the U.S. District Court for D.C. issued an opinion compelling grand jury testimony from an attorney who had previously represented Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. Now, people might be wondering, what about that whole attorney-client privilege thing? Well, the reason they were able to compel testimony is because there's this thing called the crime fraud exception. And basically that means that if you went to your attorney and went, hey, so I'd like to ask you how to commit this crime and get away with it, the government can then go, yeah, you don't get attorney-client privilege for that. And that is bad news.
When the government has proof that you did that, they can go to your lawyer and say, so we have proof that this happened, so now you're talking.
Yeah. Would you like to admit to your own criminal activity, or would you like to
Do you
implicate
want a way
your
out of this?
ex-client?
Yeah,
Or
do you
should
want
we
a way
wait
out
for
of
the
this?
pimply guy to get off the plane and then he'll just give it up to us?
Yes.
Yeah, because you know they're just
Because
going to
he's about to get off at Dulles and we're making an arrest.
Well, at this point, we know that Papadopoulos, I mean, had to have given up a lot. You don't end up with a 0 as the beginning of your sentencing guidelines, 0 to 6 months or 0 to 5 months, without talking, without handing people over, without wearing a wire. Like a 0, like that's a.
Well, he's
well,
the
He's
reason.
gonna get probation.
Well, yeah, because that's the exchange he gave, and they also dropped the obstruction charge
Yep.
in exchange for this. And what I love about it is he's the one who told the FBI, they're like, oh yeah, Manafort has all of the emails printed out in his home, and sure enough, in the no-knock raid, all of those emails were printed out in Manafort's home. Like,
Why
what-
would you do that?
Exactly. These people are so
Why
dumb.
would you- okay, like I was stuck at like I expect Trump and Trump's people to be this stupid because like I don't understand everybody who keeps saying, oh, Trump's smart, he has money, he must be smart. Like no, he's stupid. Everybody around him is stupid, but that's an impressive
He was
level of stupid.
born into
My-
money and has made and lost a lot, which you can do once you start with a lot of money.
My grandfather did some bookkeeping for Whitey Bulger back in the day. And even my grandfather, who has no education, knew to shred all of the paper that he
All
would
of
do
it.
all of his work on.
Printers are really cheap and easy to get these days
this
too.
was back in the day.
There's
This was
no
when my
excuse
dad was
when
growing
you're-
up in the 60s when shredders weren't a thing in your household.
But worse, it's not even that like they found it on a computer or something like it. He
Printed
made a
them out
second
for no
copy of
reason.
evidence.
Yeah, he had boxes of this in his home.
I mean, thanks.
Yeah, like thank you for being so stupid.
Now, let's talk a little bit about George Papadopoulos and what happened with him, because he's not Paul Manafort. He's not as well known. Now, there's a lot here because it turns out that he flipped. He flipped immediately.
He flipped like a pancake.
Yeah.
A
So
well done pancake.
George Papadopoulos,
The plea deal says proactive cooperation.
which is a specific term as opposed to retroactive
It
cooperation.
means a little bitch.
Yes, it means they didn't come to you and say, tell us about this. And you said, okay, here's everything I know. It means they leaned on you and you told them everything you knew, whether they asked or not. Or it means you helped them gather evidence, like you wore a wire.
Yeah, no. So they showed up at Dulles when he flew in, and then he probably peed his pants and was like, "Okay, fine. I know all the answers."
So he was a foreign policy advisor for the Trump campaign.
Loosely.
Very
Despite Trump saying that he was an oil consultant.
oil and gas consultant.
To be fair, he probably did a little bit in Model UN. So like,
Yeah,
you know.
Did.
To be fair, Trump probably doesn't remember anything from one moment to the next.
But I hear he has one of the greatest memories of all time.
And even
Lots of things, don't
and
you?
even points
Except
to his
to-
head when he says it.
Yeah, yeah.
Except, of course,
At
in
least
the
he
Trump
knows
University.
where the memories are, like when he points at his head.
Except in the Trump University deposition, where where he kept saying that he couldn't recall things, and then the lawyer was like, "But don't you remember telling me that you have one of the great memories of all time?" And he was like, "I remember you saying that I said that. I don't remember saying that."
I like the part where he's looking at his signature on documents and he's confused. Like, I guess I don't know.
I guess I signed this.
Maybe.
This is the same man who walked past his own limo when he got off a plane that was like right at the bottom of the stairs.
I do genuinely believe the limited literacy theory.
I would
Oh
believe
yeah,
that, yeah.
he can't read. I'm convinced.
Anyway, so George Papadopoulos was, well, let's just start with the fact that Trump, of course, promptly said that on the 31st, when it was all, few people knew he tweeted this out, quote, "Few people knew the young low-level volunteer named George," end quote. And also his former campaign advisor, Michael Caputo, dismissed George as a volunteer, quote unquote, coffee boy, and said, quote, "He never showed up at Trump Tower, never had any interaction with any of the campaign leaders around me, and the leaders of the Washington office of the campaign didn't even know who he was until his name appeared in the press." So that's what they're saying now.
This is like those old school 80s coming of age movies where the nerdy kid where the cool kids are like, "Hey, if you go over there and do this thing, well, you'll be part of the crew." And then the kid runs off and then they all leave and then he comes back, "Hey guys, I did it," and they're all gone.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it's funny that they're saying this now, because on March 31st, 2016, Trump proudly tweeted and Instagrammed out a picture of a quote-unquote national security meeting that he was having with his advisors, with a conference table with him and 12 advisors sitting around it. And Papadopoulos was one of those seated at the table right next to former Department of Defense Inspector General Joe Schmitz, and only a couple seats away from Jeff Sessions, who was the head of the foreign policy team for the Trump campaign.
These images are on Getty Images.
Yeah, because Getty.
No, this was just tweeted out by Trump. It's still there. That tweet still exists. You can look at that picture on Trump's Twitter.
And it's funny because they're all
That's
sitting around the
insane.
table and Georgie Coffee Boy is sitting there with his back straight as can be, and he's his hands are folded on the
I don't
table.
think a coffee boy sits a couple seats away from Sessions and in between kind of them and Trump. You know,
Yeah,
I
no.
don't think that's where the coffee boy. I think he's the guy by the door holding the coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Now, also, there's the minor detail that during the campaign, when Trump was interviewed by the Washington Post and trying to explain who his foreign policy team was, he mentioned George Papadopoulos by name and said that he was an oil and gas consultant, great guy. Actually, that quote not only is in the Washington Post, attributed to Trump, but it's also, funny enough, on George Papadopoulos's LinkedIn. Because,
Indeed.
Now, so anyway, that establishes that they are full of shit on who he was and what role he played.
No, they've done this for everyone.
Yeah, this is something they've
It's
done
like every time,
literally
like
every time.
someone in the campaign says something, they like, they did this with Paul Manafort. Oh, he wasn't part of the campaign. He wasn't really a big thing, and did this with like Roger Stone. And it's like every time someone like even Mike Flynn. Oh, Mike Flynn wasn't that important. And it's like,
speaking of Manafort, something that didn't even make it into the notes, but like relevant here. Paul Manafort, they're like, oh, he was just the volunteer campaign staff for a little while.
he was only here for a couple of months. Wasn't a big deal.
Now, the funny thing is, they're right. He was a volunteer. He did not get paid for that job. Now, that should have raised some big fucking red flags because campaign managers always get paid. In fact, the previous campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, was getting paid $20,000 a month by them. So this guy comes in and is like, yeah, I'll do it for free. And they're not like, so who's actually paying you?
No, because Trump loves not paying people. So when someone says, hey, I'll work
I
for
mean,
free, he's like,
He just
great,
thinks
come on in.
He just thinks I'm that great of a person that people want to work for free for me.
Oh, yeah.
Believe in me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to Papadopoulos. He was arrested, it turns out, at the end of July.
July 27th to be precise.
And in fact, pleaded guilty on October the 5th to the charge of making false statements to FBI investigators when asked about contacts with foreigners claiming to have high-level Russian connections. See, he told the FBI when they interviewed him in January 2017 in a fully voluntary meeting where they told him that it was a crime to lie to them, but, apparently he wasn't listening to that part, I guess.
Well, no, because he probably was under the influence that hey, Trump's got my back. He says we're friends.
That is a possibility, yeah. So anyway,
I don't think he was on the list of people that might have gotten pardoned.
Oh, no, because the
never
list gets...
He was the coffee boy, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also the list changes every day. Like some people are his best friends today. They're awful tomorrow. You know how it works.
Just a mean girl.
It's Regina George. What? You can't sit with us.
So when he was
You just ask somebody why they're Russian.
So when he was interviewed by the FBI in January, he said that he had been in contact with a London-based professor named Joseph Mifsud, who'd claimed that he had dirt on Hillary, including thousands of emails, but that he dismissed it because he didn't believe the professor. He thought he was a quote-unquote nothing. Well, turns out that isn't true at all. Papadopoulos took him seriously, met with him in March 2016, where he was introduced to someone.
This was like a coordinated trip, too, like that
Yes.
people knew about.
And he was introduced to someone he was told was Putin's niece, although it turned out she wasn't. And that Mifsud also introduced Papadopoulos to a guy by the name of Timofeev, who claimed to have connections to the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I should mention briefly who these people are, because who the fuck knows who Joseph Mifsud and Ivan Timofeev is?
They all sound like troll bots on Twitter.
So, well, the Mifsud has claimed, he told the Washington Post that he had, quote, absolutely no contact with the Russian government. He told the Daily Beast, quote, I do not know anybody from the Russian government. I'm an academic.
I do not know Russia in a box. I do not know Russia from a fox. I do not know Russia here or there. I do not know Russia anywhere.
And he also told the Daily Telegraph that he has a quote-unquote clear conscience, and he denied basically all of Papadopoulos' claims, that he never told Papadopoulos any of these things. Well, it turns out that it's not really true that he doesn't have Russian connections, because there are photos on the website of Russia's embassy in the UK showing him meeting with embassy representative Ernest Chernikin in July 2017. There's a biography from a 2013 business conference he attended that said that he, quote, has advised governments on international education issues in many countries, including Morocco, Syria, Russia, Tunisia, and Italy.
All the best countries.
There's a 2014 Russian embassy press release showing that he met with the Russian ambassador to the UK, Alexander Yakovenko, in May 2014. And in early 2017, he invited a Russian by the name of Alexei Klishin to the London Academy of Diplomacy to present a lecture. Well, Klishin is a department head and professor in the International Law Division of the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, which is run by Russia's foreign ministry, but he's also a former member of the upper house of Russia's parliament. And if that wasn't enough, Mifsud also participated in events at the VODS Club in 2014 and 2016. The VODS Club is a Russian think tank with very close ties to the Russian government and where Putin speaks every year. In
That's
fact,
like Voldemort.
he spoke at the 2014 event where he was at least referenced. One of his speeches was referenced at this in the thing that Mifsud actually participated in that meeting.
So what you're saying is, if Clearacel's George Papadopoulos did a little Googling, he would have found out how close this whole thing was to Russia.
Yeah. Now,
Unless he wanted to work with Russia.
Now, also, Ivan Timofeev is the director of programs at the Russian International Affairs Council, which is a think tank in Moscow. And in a May the 4th email exchange from 2016, he wrote to Papadopoulos, quote, "I have just talked to my colleagues from the MFA. They are open for cooperation," end quote. That email was forwarded by Papadopoulos to a high-ranking campaign official, according to the official paperwork, but it's since been identified that was Corey Lewandowski, who was then campaign manager of the Trump campaign. MFA, of course, is the Russian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, not the Museum for Fine Arts.
I was like, for a second, I was like, ooh, we're getting some art. We're getting art involved.
So this is about the easiest connection to Russia that can possibly be made.
Right.
Like
So,
literally as connected as possible, these two.
Well, like, remember the subject line? Read, like, R-E, like, Russia, Hillary, collusion. Like,
Yeah.
yes.
ugh.
Now, it gets better because what did Papadopoulos do with all this? Well, he emailed a campaign supervisor, now revealed to be Trump campaign national co-chair Sam Clovis, and several members of the campaign team about arranging a meeting between the Trump campaign and Russian officials, including a April 25th, 2016 email to a senior policy advisor, who I don't believe has been identified yet, which read in part, quote, "The Russian government has an open invitation by Putin for Mr. Trump to meet him when he is ready," end quote.
Wait, wasn't Clovis just for USDA?
Yes, that is the same Clovis. He is also, his lawyer is the one that pushed the Uranium One story and has pushed a bunch of other bullshit stories too. So there's some other interesting connections there that, again, this is some of the stuff that I couldn't...
So he's friends with Bannon and the Mercers.
I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. I didn't even get into putting notes about Sam Clovis because there would have been another like 3 pages.
That indictment's coming. So
yeah, we'll get to that in a few weeks.
We'll talk about when that indictment's unsealed.
Now, Papadopoulos' efforts continued throughout the summer, including numerous emails to various campaign officials, including Lewandowski and others, including emails from April 27th, an email wanting, quote, "to discuss Russia's interest in hosting Mr. Trump," end quote. And in this email, he wrote, quote, "have been receiving a lot of calls over the last month about Putin wanting to host him and the team when the time is right," end quote. And another email the same day to a different senior policy advisor writing, quote, "have some interesting messages coming in from Moscow about a trip when the time is right," end quote. So then in June, he emailed Lewandowski about Russia again, wanting to follow up. And this time, Lewandowski replied, telling him to talk to Sam Clovis because, quote, "he is running point," end quote. This was followed by a June 19th exchange with Clovis, where Papadopoulos wrote, quote, "I'm willing to make the trip off the record if it's in the interest of Mr. Trump, and the campaign is willing to meet specific people," which prompted Clovis to reply, quote, "make the trip if it is feasible," end quote. Clovis's attorney, who I mentioned previously was involved with spreading the Uranium One shit, Victoria Townsend, told Washington Post that Clovis, quote, "always vigorously opposed any Russian trip for Donald Trump and or the campaign," end quote, and that Clovis was, quote, "being polite," end quote, when he encouraged Papadopoulos, saying that the campaign had, quote, "a strict rule against that no person could travel abroad as a representative of the campaign," end quote, which, if you believe that excuse, really?
Didn't a couple of them go to London? Maybe they traveled abroad for the campaign.
And maybe a few
London's
other
not abroad,
places.
I guess, to them.
Maybe the Seychelles, you know.
Maybe.
Well, I know Ivanka went to Azerbaijan. What's that country that
Azerbaijan?
Yeah, that's the one. She went there a bunch of times. These fucking idiots.
Yeah, no, and so according to the plea deal, we've learned some additional details that Papadopoulos has told investigators that otherwise people would be busy denying, and well, they're busy denying anyway. But according to the plea deal, he attended the meeting that Trump tweeted out the picture of and Instagrammed the picture of. And at that meeting, Papadopoulos introduced himself to the group at the meeting and stated in sum and substance that he had connections that could help arrange a meeting between then candidate Trump and President Putin. Now, the New York Times found a former aide who was at the meeting and was willing to talk under anonymity and said that Trump listened with interest, asked questions of Papadopoulos, but, quote, didn't say yes and he didn't say no, end quote. He also said that finally, after all of this, Jeff Sessions spoke vehemently against the idea, asking others not to discuss it again, and that Trump let it drop. Now, that's very interesting in its own right because, well, we've talked a bit about Jeff Sessions before, so let's review.
He's an evil elf.
Yes, he is. But let's review some of his evil specifically related to Russia.
Oh, I don't think I've ever had. I was a surrogate for the Trump campaign for a while, and I didn't have any contact with the Russians.
Right, and that was in his confirmation hearings.
The first one. And the second one.
Right. This is months and months later when he was in a fucking meeting where someone talked about this shit. Also, back in June, in testimony in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Sessions said, quote, I have never met with or had any conversations with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. Further, I have no knowledge of any such conversations by anyone connected to the Trump campaign, end quote. Which we now know they were sending emails constantly to every fucking person in the campaign about this shit.
They were CCing everybody.
Seriously, there's no way that
and the person pushing like really hard for a direct meeting between the two, Trump and Putin, was supposedly right under Sessions on his side of the foreign relations for the campaign.
And is the aforementioned person that was shut down by Sessions in the meeting where he talked about this openly in front of Sessions. And we have that on camera because we have a picture from that meeting where they're sitting 2 seats away.
A former aide who attended this meeting where we see the picture of Papadopoulos sitting a few seats away from Sessions and Trump told the New York Times that Trump listened with interest and asked questions of Papadopoulos, but didn't say yes and didn't say no. The aide said that finally Jeff Sessions himself spoke vehemently against the idea, asking others not to discuss it again. Now, that's interesting, and good on you, Sessions, for being right on that one.
Sure.
But then you lied, telling us that shit never happened.
And lied repeatedly under oath. And in fact, it actually gets worse.
And in his amended written statement, too.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Now, well, it gets worse. First of all, there was the fact that...
I like how every time we think we've hit, like the low, they're like, oh, it still can go lower?
Yeah, it is so much worse than you thought was possible.
There's still more to go. Oh, okay.
So, of course, he said that, you know, in his confirmation hearings that he had never had any contact with any Russians, blah, blah, blah. And then we found out that, in fact, he'd met with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. and spy master, Sergei Kislyak.
Which, is he really a spy master?
Yeah.
He's a big man in a lot of photos.
Yeah, but he's the
Recently,
guy that managed...
though,
No, he's not a spy. He's a spy master. He manages spies. He's not a spy himself.
Yeah,
he
you've never
handles
seen
recruitment.
him actually talking to one of his spies because they're good.
Now,
You only see him in the picture.
He just looks like a baked potato. Like that's
Yeah, he does.
that's undercooked.
Now, initially we found out about 2 meetings between the two, one of which was actually at an event during the RNC on the week of July the 18th, which then he had a meeting almost 2 months later in September on the 8th with 2 of his senior aides and Kislyak in his office. Now, you might say he's a senator, he was a senator, he was on the Armed Services Committee. Not really a big deal, right?
Well, if he said that,
well,
then it would be a different story.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that, well, it turns out that when they investigated, it turned out the other 25 senators on the Armed Services Committee, not one of them reported having a single meeting with Kislyak in the entire year of 2016. And if you know the duties of the various committees, you realize that the Armed Services Committee is not the Foreign Relations Committee and not really the committee that does a whole lot of foreign negotiations or anything like that.
Especially not with the spy masters.
Right. I mean, he is also the ambassador of Russia, but...
But I mean, like, the fact that, like, because, like, that was the whole thing I remember with the first test, like, his first hearing when Franken, like, didn't even, like, when he implicated himself and Franken was like, what would you do if, like, you found out, like, Trump campaign staffers were, like, talking to Russians? And he was like, well, I was part of the campaign and I didn't talk to Russians. And Franken was like, that's not what I asked, but thanks for lying.
Yes.
And, but, like, even if he had said, like, well, since I'm part of this, armed foreign, like the armed, like, committee, like, it's possible I could have had a conversation.
Yeah, he could have made that sound plausible.
But, like, completely forgot that his whole, like, job as a senator and was like, no, I've never talked to anyone overseas. Never, ever, 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 ever. Don't even know what a Russia is. And it's like, yeah, dude, we know you're lying because of your job.
Oh, and then after those first two were revealed, it was said that there was another meeting earlier, back in April 2016. April again.
The Mayflower Hotel?
Right.
Oh.
And Sessions initially said that didn't happen. And then he said, okay, well, I think we were both there, but he couldn't remember talking to Kislyak and said, quote, certainly, I can assure you nothing improper happened if I'd had a conversation with him, and it's conceivable that it occurred. I just don't remember it. Well, then someone found a Getty Images photo from that event showing them talking.
And didn't they invite him? Like, wasn't he invited?
Yeah. So Sessions has insisted that he met with Kislyak as a senator and not a campaign surrogate. Never talked about the campaign.
But, like, now he remembers what his actual job was at the time. Oh,
But
that's right. I'm still a senator.
Not only is there the part where all of the other members of the Armed Services Committee are like, what are you on about? But as previously mentioned, one of the meetings was at an event for the Republican National Committee. This is the National Convention for the RNC. It's expressly about campaigning. He met him there, and Sessions used campaign funds to go there. If he went there on Senate business, he misused campaign funds. So, and then, to make it even worse, we have U.S. intelligence intercepts showing conversations between Kislyak and his superiors back in Russia, talking about two of the Sessions meetings and saying that they had discussed campaign-related matters, including policy issues important to Moscow. This is just insanely
and what I have to say is, what we have written down here, and this is not attacking Mac's ability to put these things together, but just imagine how simple these connections are and how blatant they are, and that we have them down in our notes, and how much better an investigator and follower of these paths Mueller is, because he has all of this plus 10 times more.
Yeah, and even this is only a fraction of what I could have put together with more time and a little bit more effort.
Yeah, as you said earlier, this could have been 100 pages of notes.
So
Mueller has all of this times 10. I mean, charges are coming for 20 more people, I think.
Oh yeah, I would. There are going to be a lot. This is not a investigation where they're trying to nail, just some random criminal. No, this is fundamentally, essentially, a RICO investigation. They are looking into a corrupt organization and they are prosecuting it like it was the mafia, which it basically is. So
I can't wait for Don Jr. to get an indictment.
Oh yeah, and I mean,
Don Jr. and Kushner are the two I want to see it happen to.
I don't see any way either of them gets away without it.
They've both admitted to crimes.
Yes.
But also Don Jr. admitted his crime in the dumbest way possible.
Oh, I know, it was insane.
And he's still admitting to his crime as if he did.
Trying to pretend like it proves he's innocent.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like, so what? I just I colluded with Russia. I don't understand what the problem is. Like, what do you want from me?
Yeah,
what do you want?
Big deal?
Like, you're all complaining that I'm colluding with Russia. When I'm telling you, I'm colluding with Russia.
I want to switch to another fun piece of this whole mess that is about the collusion, about the indictments, about everything, and let's talk about this wonderful information you pulled up about the Trump Organization computers and all of their domains.
That was one that just came out today, and this is nuts.
This is new info for a lot of people.
Honestly,
I think
it's really not that nuts knowing how stupid the Trump campaign is.
But I mean, the fact that it's still active. Anyway, we should explain it first. So,
I know. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes.
There's a report from Unhack.
Hack the Vote.
on Hack the Vote, they identified more than 250 subdomains of domains registered to the Trump Organization. And they all redirect traffic to computers in St. Petersburg. Now, a subdomain, for the people who aren't that technical, is when you're on a website and it has something.com. That first part, like, you have www.google.com. The www is the subdomain. Or you might be logged into some account you have on some website and it's taking you to myaccount.somewebsite.com. Well, my account is the subdomain.
And for those who don't understand what St. Petersburg is, well, that's Russia.
So when you own a domain, you can create as many of these as you want. You can have unlimited subdomains and, for all intents and purposes. And there are 250 of them off of Trump Organization domains that send traffic directly to St. Petersburg.
Well, it's not direct, actually, which is
yes.
where it gets even more interesting. But
It goes
we'll get there in a
through
second.
all kinds of servers, in fact, but it ends up in St. Petersburg.
And all of these subdomains
Are hosted on GoDaddy, our least favorite host.
The actual domains are hosted on GoDaddy, and many of
Yes.
the primary domains are hosted on GoDaddy's shared servers.
Yeah,
which is just funny that the Trump Organization is going through GoDaddy to begin with.
they don't have some kind of actual secure system.
Which
Yeah.
which that means like Don Jr. and Eric are like the ones buying it all. Like, oh, I got another one.
I was informed that it was Barron.
So all of this traffic, these subdomains are on a block of IPs owned by hostkey.ru, which is a company named Mir Telematiki Limited. And all the traffic is routed through Italy, then Moscow, then to a server that is located in Siberia before going to its final destination in St. Petersburg.
Now, before we move on there, it should be noted that Russia is kind of notorious for screwing with geolocation data. They actually have been, there are places where you can go in Russia where if you look at a GPS, it will tell you are dozens of miles away from where you are, and that is an active broadcast by them to screw with that. So when they say that it geolocates in Siberia, but that doesn't mean that's where it is.
Right.
In fact, the hop through Siberia doesn't actually seem to increase the latency. It seems like it's a computer somewhere super close to Moscow because it's not taking time for things to get anywhere.
Which
Sorry,
means
I just looked ahead in the notes and I on the bottom here.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that.
And this is perfect.
So most of this block of IP addresses aren't hosting websites. They have interesting different whois from other host key RU blocks. Contact listed is Andrei Shevchenko, who started working at Gazprom about a month after these subdomains were set up. Gazprom being a large energy company in Russia, which is owned by oligarchs and funnels all kinds of money right up the chain all the way to Putin.
Gazprom is one of the well-known, very closely tied to the Russian government ones.
So most of the subdomains were set up in August of 2013, and Alien Vault OTX has records of some of the subdomains being used as recently as March 2017.
And many of them are still active.
So the IP addresses in Russia belong to the same service provider used by one of the servers hosting WikiLeaks.org. And of course,
fact,
that's interesting.
Every single hop, once you get into Russia on that network, the traffic goes initially through to the site, goes through to these subdomains, goes through Italy, then to Moscow, then to the server that geolocates in Siberia, and then back to St. Petersburg. Well, all three of those in Russia are the same ones that are the same IP addresses, the same servers that WikiLeaks uses.
So this server was established approximately 1 week before the Podesta emails were released and is located in Moscow, with IP location tools showing both the Trump subdomain traffic transiting through and WikiLeaks hosted in a public location near the Kremlin. WikiLeaks has multiple servers, two located in Moscow, and the route for that traffic also includes the trip to Siberia, possibly. Again, with little difference in latency when making this long round trip. And what that really means is how long it takes the data to get from one location to the other. When you route it through many more cities, your data should slow down because of the distance.
It takes time for
And
it
we're
to get
talking
someplaces.
milliseconds. We're not talking seconds, minutes, hours. We're talking small.
Yeah, but doesn't Russia have one of the fastest internet speeds?
In terms of the total bandwidth available, it's good, but latency isn't just a factor of bandwidth. It's literally a factor of distance. There is a limit to how fast data can travel, and that is a hard limit by physics.
Yep.
And we're talking an 800-mile round trip. That should add time, and it's just not, which means that it's probably not where that server is claiming to be.
Oh,
In
you mean
fact, it's a lot closer to Moscow.
wait, are you saying that like the Trump campaign's lying?
No, I'm saying that the server in
That's
Russia
that's connected to Trump
yes.
is lying?
Yes.
Oh, weird. It's a weird theme we have with Trump. It's just like
Now-
it's a whole bunch of lies.
The subdomains themselves are weird. You can find Unhack the Votes report on this online, and there's a lot of them, and some of them are relatively innocuous, and some of them are just kind of weird. But on top of the subdomains, the OTX has records of file names that were on these servers, many of which reference inappropriate content, you might say. A lot of them are repeated on multiple servers and have file names that are written in leet speak. Like one.
Leet speak is, the act of replacing letters with numbers, like 4 for A, 0 for O, things like that.
And some of these ones said things like, they were titled, once you convert it out of leet speak, deliver1today.html1.zip, or lovely girls for you, or lovely girls only for you.html1.zip, or nice girls at this weekend.html1.zip.
You will pee on your bed.
Or great pussy for tea this week.html1.zip.
Which means the PP tape is real.
And incidentally, they looked to see if any of these file names were associated with known malware. Strangely enough, not one of them is.
That's exactly what malware looks like.
Which means the PP tape is real.
I mean, you're jumping
if
to
you-
a conclusion there.
If you remember,
no,
He just
it's-
wants the PP tape to be real.
Everyone
If you
wants the
remember-
PP tape to be
I
real.
don't. I don't.
if you remember,
I
if you
can't
remember
wait.
the early days
I don't think the
of
people who
peer-to-peer
actually
networking,
did the PP-ing want the PP tape to be real.
No, those poor girls, they should be rescued, but
Yeah.
the PP tape is real.
it's legitimate to look to see if those were the actual file names associated with real malware, because anyone that was on like
So what we have
LimeWire
here-
back in the day, you saw those.
Yeah, getting past all of the technical stuff, all of the latency and all this other fun stuff, what we have here is domains owned by the Trump organization that then have subdomains added on top of them that the owners of the domain can do. So the Trump organization, that all point to servers in St. Petersburg in Russia, and all share IPs and server locations with WikiLeaks.
And follow the same network paths.
That's a hard thing to spoof.
So there was
that's
a,
probably real.
Yeah.
So there was a question that was like asked, or like I first saw it on Vox, and it was, here's the scary reality of where we are in the world. Let's say Mueller, now we prove 100% conspiracy, collusion, execution with Russia and Trump campaign, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, what do we do? Because guess what?
I don't think we're allowed to discuss that on the show.
No, what I'm saying is like, because look at spineless Paul Ryan, and when he was like, when the indictments came out, and they asked Paul Ryan for a statement, and his thing was, I'm really excited about tax cuts, and completely ignored the indictments. So it's like we have a Congress that's 100% complicit.
Well, you say that, but I mean, ultimately, I think eventually Paul Ryan is willing to go along with this to not only save Republican seats in Congress, but ultimately, unless he is actively complicit himself and involved in all this, which I would not doubt given some of the information we have about, Paul Manafort's meeting in the Trump Tower, having made the Trump Jr. meeting, I should say, that Manafort was at, but we have notes that Manafort took there, in which they were cryptic notes involving some sort of mention of contributions in close proximity to the letters GOP. And the fact that apparently hackers compromised the
RNC,
Republican,
yeah, the RNC as well.
but didn't leak anything from those.
Yeah, they just like gave them back. Here you go. Sorry, whoopsies.
Yeah. So I mean, that's not.
Well, no,
Like,
it's just like that is a scary reality where it's like I could see like Mueller completely like or all of our confirmation bias comes to light, right? And everything we thought and like like we're like have been conspiring like or like alleging is true, and then it doesn't matter. Nothing like.
I mean, what I was gonna say though was, assuming that Paul Ryan isn't up to his eyeballs in this shit, which is entirely possible. Ultimately, the end goal is if Trump gets not the end goal, but like the end result is if Trump gets impeached. Well, quite frankly, Mike Pence, who was brought in by Manafort and was the head of the transition, and we know lied about what he knew and when regarding Flynn at a bare minimum, and quite possibly some other cases, he is probably going down too, which means we get, we have Paul Ryan as the guy that's going to be the new president.
Okay,
I think he's going to be willing to go for impeachment there.
Oh God, that's even a scarier thought. Fucking President Ryan.
No, that's
No, that's not scarier than President Trump or President Pence. It's just bad.
It's still it's
but
horrifying.
but
no,
like,
you know what's the scariest
Worse
thing
than
of
that
all?
is Orrin Hatch after him.
The scariest thing of the
I can
scariest
deal
thing
with
of
Orrin
all.
Hatch because he's about to be dead.
I'd say the scariest part of all of this is the part where, in comparison, Paul Ryan as president looks like a good idea.
But his face is so punchable.
It is the most.
Hey, he's not Ted Cruz.
No, but
That is true.
he's second to punchable to Ted.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh God.
Also, I just want to bring up one other thing from the notes from a couple of FBI officials talking about the whole thing involving Papadopoulos and what we have had revealed as a result of all this. Retired senior FBI official James Gagliano commented about the statement of what Papadopoulos was involved in. Quote, asset recruitment involves having someone safe approach you and ascertain your viability. That is I added something there. Viability, how gullible or naive or desperate you might be. And then you get passed off from the safe approach guy to the more connected and skilled and knowledgeable operative. It's a classic recruitment method. Could the professor, that was a term used to refer to Mifsud in the documents because they masked some names in the documents, which means that they didn't want some of that information getting public because then people would kind of know what they knew.
Or
to
who's
some degree.
next.
Yeah. But anyway, could the professor have been the safe entry guy? Speculation, but might be a good bet, end quote. And in a sworn affidavit to the U.S. District Court for D.C., one of the FBI agents who interviewed Papadopoulos, Special Agent Robert Gibbs, who's a veteran counterespionage investigator, said that Russian intelligence and security services often rely on private intermediaries, including, quote, individuals associated with academia and think tanks in such a capacity, end quote. And the tactic serves to, quote, hide the overt involvement of the Russian government and provides deniability, end quote. Is any of this ringing a bell for anyone? Because this is sounding awfully similar to some of the things we've been hearing about, doesn't it?
It definitely makes complete sense now, how this all went down.
And just imagine how much more information hasn't even, like, if you look at how prosecutors go after criminal enterprises, this is watching the classic opening from a chess grandmaster. You are seeing them go after high-level people for financial crimes, which are super easy to prove, and which have nothing to do with the actual crime people they want to go after. So there's no reason for Trump to pardon them because the crimes aren't related to Trump's activities.
I heard that they were like there was some type of bill or there was something being floated in Congress that would curtail pardoning power since the indictments.
I heard something about that, but I haven't. I didn't.
I don't know.
See
Maybe
a whole lot,
I don't like. Obviously, I mean, McConnell's not going to bring anything to the floor, and neither is
no.
Ryan. But at least people are like starting to like talk about. I don't know. Maybe we should because I mean, the executive authority is too broad. That needs to kind of be like reined in a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, he's going after the high-level people for that, and going after them like straight up. Guns blazing. He's going with a bunch of their financial crimes, over a decade in prison each. And meanwhile, he goes after someone that he'd flipped a while ago, who is a relatively small figure that no one was really paying attention to. and got that guy to spill all the details of all of his dirty dealings. This guy isn't important enough to the organization to be likely to get pardoned. And he already flipped, so he's, they can get him to like spill the beans on everyone and get all the information. And now they're going to be comparing that to everything that they get told so they can bust everyone else.
I was once told by someone who worked, I think it was with the State Department, like this was a while ago when like we had a real president. And he said that the best way to get information is to befriend this chief of staffs. They spill all the dirt. So it's like this kid, I mean, chief of staff or like, Paul Manafort, it's like you get side by side with like those, someone who's like top level and they just.
And Reince Priebus also, already talked to the Mueller team.
Yeah, in fact, they specifically wanted to keep the indictments under seal so that other people, they could interview everyone without people getting a whiff of what was going on. And that was part of the reasoning. And it so happens that Reince Priebus and Sean Spicer were two of the people they interviewed in that interval.
Yeah, but you can't really trust Sean Spicer to say like the truth.
No.
Yeah, but that just means that he'll be in even more legal trouble.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be great.
Which, will be hilarious, but whatever. Win-win, right?
If an indictment comes out for Sean Spicer, I hope to God, if there is a God, it puts in the inauguration quote in there. Just for funsies.
But yeah, so they if you look at the structure of what is going on here in terms of this, like thinking of it as an investigation into a criminal enterprise that they are trying to bring down, like a mafia group, they are doing this just the classic, the way that you would expect from the people that are the best in the world at this, which that team
Remember,
is.
they took down Al Capone with taxes.
Yeah.
They always come at you financially first.
And
because they don't even have to prove intent there. All they have to do is prove that it happened.
Wesley Snipes.
And Wesley Snipes too. Yeah, same thing. A little different.
But taxes get you all the time.
I like Snipes.
Oh, yeah, no. But it's just, like the Trump campaign being corrupt is not a new thing. Like this is coming from like the first time we found out about like the whole Trump family and the Trump like real estate enterprise was when they were sued for discriminatory practices in like the 80s or the 70s.
I think the first one was the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the idea of like Trump being like a corrupt like business is not like has been like a known thing.
He was like a meme for that in the 80s. Anytime you wanted to like make jokes about the corrupt, like go into 1980s Mad Magazine or something, and you'll find jokes about Trump being the shitheel corrupt businessman.
Yeah, and just like the butt end of every joke because it's like no one ever invited him places, but he always was there bragging about corruption.
Yeah.
So, we're at the end of an hour talk about the indictments, the collusion, Trump, the new information about these domains that
we could have
points
gone
to
on for
Russia.
easily another hour.
And what we know now is that a lot more is still coming. I mean, there's going to be more indictments.
This is just the beginning.
Papadopoulos spoke. He sang...
Sang like a canary. Like a little bitch.
And probably wore a wire.
Yeah, and Priebus probably spoke. Spicer probably spoke.
I don't even know if he needed to wear a wire. Like I think he probably just like got them on speakerphone while he was sitting
I meant figuratively.
in Mueller's office. It was like, "Hey Manny, what are you up to?" And he's like, just laundering some money. What are you guys doing?"
Right?
Called him from Mueller's phone.
With everything we've read and seen, it's that easy.
Yeah,
to get these people.
Yeah.
You hear these stories about like the dumbass bank robbers who like made the idiot mistakes like walking in and like filling out a deposit slip before like writing their demand on the back, and so it had their bank account number and name and signature and everything. And these guys are dumber than that.
And like they're putting in the memo line like Putin money, like right?
Yeah, this is horrible. So we're going to hopefully find out more indictments. I personally would like to see a new indictment like every week, like just like make it our weekly thing every Monday. He drops a new one.
An October tradition through the end of whatever the impeachment process is.
We are probably going to get several cycles of indictments because they're going to try and bust a group of people, try and flip them, get information, use that to get the next charges on people. But they'll also have a bunch of charges in reserve for this person didn't cooperate. Well, fuck them. We're amending the complaint with another dozen charges.
Yes.
There will be a lot of that. There will be amending complaints. There will be new complaints. They'll be bringing in lots of people. There'll be indictments that get
unsealed. And plea deals can get rescinded if they fuck up too.
Oh yeah, if you look at the details of Papadopoulos' plea deal, which is fairly standard, they're like, you will do anything we ever say And
They
you
left
don't
themselves
actually.
a lot of room to take his plea deal away from him.
It is almost literally, you will do whatever
He looks
we say.
at them wrong and they take it away. Like,
No,
it's pretty bad.
They're like, if we ever come to you and ask you for anything, you
They-
do it.
Did they include the guinea pig crushing clause?
I didn't see that mentioned, but
So, I think we want to move on from all of this, as we just know that there's going to be so much more.
we'll be on this topic a lot more in the future.
And I want to get Anna a little involved here. So I want to move on to an interesting topic that, while she'll be talking about locally, this is a problem that's happening all over the nation. We have lots of money coming into small local elections, attempting to influence them and basically ruin the public school system and empower the charter school system in a
You can
way
thank Betsy DeVos for that.
in a way
Sure.
which will bring lots of money to already rich people. So Anna's got some stuff to talk about here. So why don't you tell us all about it?
All right, everybody, local politics hour. Stay with me. This one's actually pretty good.
Not an hour though.
Not an hour, no. So Mac just went through a whole bunch of stuff with Trump and a whole bunch of names. I'm gonna tell you some names that aren't people that you need to know personally, and they're not gonna matter for what you're talking with your friends about tomorrow morning, but they're important to our story. So we have in our city in Malden a school committee where each seat represents a ward. And each ward votes for somebody who lives there to go up to school committee. Ward 3, their incumbent isn't running for re-election, so they had to have a broader race. They had 3 primaried out the third person, so we're down to 2 people. Jen Spadafora and Mecca Smith. These are 2 candidates. Jen Spadafora is an independent, and her opponent, Mecca Smith, has a D next to her name. Doesn't necessarily mean that she's progressive. Full disclosure, as a member of our Revolution Malden, I helped to, vote to endorse Jen Spadafora for this seat. I think you will understand why at the end of this. This is the first political campaign for both of these candidates. They haven't run for anything before. Mecca Smith has a background in education. She worked for Teach for America. She's been around the country a little bit. She grew up in Georgia, graduated from Amherst College out in Western Massachusetts, went to go teach in Miami with TFA, and she moved back up to Boston area to coach K-8 teachers. Meanwhile, Jen Spadafora is more what you expect from a first-time political candidate. She grew up here. She graduated through the public school system in Malden. She's raising 3 kids here. Her eldest recently graduated Malden High School, gone off to the Coast Guard. She's very involved in the local public school system. She's got a kid with special needs, so she's engaged all the time. And she does advocacy work for other moms who have kids with special needs. Kind of thing you expect. On October 20th, the candidates for every race in the city had to disclose their financials. Public information, so as soon as they file it with the city, we all get to look. Mecca Smith works as the chief of staff for KIPP, K-I-P-P, Massachusetts, which is an organization that runs charter schools. They run a charter school in Massachusetts, which is near us. They also run some charter schools in different parts of the state. Ben is somebody who was an opponent to the ballot question last year, which would have expanded the number of charter schools allowed in this state. And, I'm not going to call her a nobody, but she's not somebody who has a lot of national level anything. She is what you would consider a normal candidate for this job. Jen Spadafora's forms say that she raised about $3,000 for her campaign. Use that money to get yard signs, for the little door hanger things that you leave at people's doors when you go knocking and canvassing, dealing with the pizza cost, because, oh my God, every political campaign runs every little thing here and there. You're printing up literature, making phone calls, you're doing everything else. Mecca Smith raised about $15,000.
So 5 times as much.
Only $400 of that came from the city of Malden. She has huge donors from all over the country. Weird ones. Ones who have political ties to all kinds of fun things.
Like who?
I did a very bad job taking notes.
Like Netzelvitskaya?
One of them is a former NFL player.
Which one? Like a good one?
No, not a good one. A
He
very
doesn't know anything about the NFL.
You can't just throw that out there and not have a name.
I know. That's why I'm
He
bad at notes. I
might
only
be
have.
able to name like a quarterback or two.
Matt comes in here with 10 notes. I've got like a page and a half. Well, not even. I've got like a page. Anyway,
It's Woody Johnson.
these huge dollar amounts that are coming in aren't the only piece of this. She's also got canvassers coming in from out of town. Now, every other political campaign that I've been involved in this election cycle, which has been a lot more than I've ever, been near before, it's local people showing up. It's people going like, okay, I can do this after I pick my kids up from school.
This is a school board race. It's not like even mayor. This is super local.
She
Oh
literally
no,
is
school board
busing-
races are like really high tax. Like
Oh, they're tense, but they're not.
They
They don't raise this kind of money
Not
from
high
out of state.
profile, out of local.
they are for some people,
Apparently now.
especially for GOP voucher supporters.
That's
Well,
the
here
thing.
we go.
That's the thing. Get Mecca Smith on the school board. It's really easy to do. It doesn't cost that much if you're a big national organization or just, a relatively small national cabal to be like, yeah, we can make $15,000 up here. That's nothing. So what we see is the right doing this thing where they've figured out that the most impact for their dollar isn't throwing money at the presidential campaign. It's throwing money at these teeny tiny races where, let's be honest, most of us aren't even looking. If you vote in local, municipal elections, I'm willing to bet at least half of our listeners who even bothered to vote in those show up, look at the ballot, and go, I really wish I did any research before I got here. Oh well, check mark.
Oh, Democrats don't vote in local elections. That's a known thing. That's why the Republicans have been able to take it over, and that's why they've done a great job networking and like taking over slowly.
So really what we're talking about here is that, these people who support the charter schools, who don't support the public school system, and who want to start turning a profit on our kids' educations are doing it by running for small local offices like school board where it's very cheap. So, someone like the Mercers or the Kochs even could, or Betsy DeVos could, easily buy 1,000 of these seats without even thinking about it because they're so cheap.
I mean, look at their textbooks. The Texas School Board controls the textbooks for the nation. And that's just supposed to be for Texas, but somehow they've been able to conjure all of this power so that whatever they decide on now becomes the textbooks.
Yeah, that's a fun one too.
Well, that's just all financial. I mean, that's
but
how
that-
much money they spend on the books means they
no,
have to
but-
focus on that.
No, it's also it's beyond that. It's specifically because unlike California, which of course is an even larger state, Texas does all their textbook purchasing in bulk for the entire state. It's unified, whereas the California it's by district, so they don't necessarily pick so everything.
So they don't
has
have
to,
as large of a lobbying body.
right, and as a result, the State Board of Education for Texas, if they say that they're going with that textbook, that is the biggest textbook in that area in the U.S., and that is what everyone is going to get.
Yeah, and then it just kind of trickles out because you just see what. It's just easier to buy in bulk, and
writing textbooks is super unprofitable. It's hard to get people that are willing to write them. So you get like a few of them, and then publishing them is super profitable.
yeah.
Our kids' educations aren't for sale. This should not be for profit. If you care at all about the future of this country, you care about children's educations. And
You don't want children to be like Donald
Trump
Trump
Jr.
Jr. and Eric Trump.
The only way this gets defeated is if everyone listening to this goes to their local municipal elections, figures out who's running for school board, finds the person like our local Mecca Smith that is obviously running for outside influence and supporting all of the wrong policies, and then you vote for their opponent. You vote for the one that is anti-charter school, is not taking money from outside of the state, whose campaign is being run by local canvassers and local people whose donations come from within the city. You find that person and vote for them. If you don't do this, you are part of the problem. You are allowing them to take over these positions.
I want to speak a little bit more about that. First off, you do have, if you're listening, you most likely do have municipal elections coming up. Many states have them coming up this November 7th, so it won't have passed by the time this actually goes on the internet. You have time to do this research. You probably don't have time to dig into every single candidate, but there are local Our Revolution and Indivisible groups across the country that are doing this research for you. Quick Google will normally help you find those people, and they are out there asking candidates questions, doing some digging into where people are getting their money from, and they can lay out for you why they've chosen to endorse candidates if they're able to endorse, or why they personally, as members of this group, really wish that you would vote for a certain candidate. And before we run off, I know Kayla is about to fall asleep on me.
It's my bedtime.
I'm so sorry. I'll be done really soon, I promise. No, I want to just talk about that number, that $15,000 number there. One of the other stories we didn't get to talk too much about today because everything is insane is what's coming out about how the Hillary campaign used the Democratic National Committee. And one of the things that we see is that her campaign funneled money from the states away from these grassroots little down ballot things into her campaign. Is the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. The left is losing because we pull crap like that. We need to be supporting these very small local candidates, building this grassroots base, making sure that people on all sides of the weird progressive left, wherever you find yourself, if you're really, really into identity politics, or you're really, really into, your Fourth Amendment and your, net neutrality rights.
Basically, we just need to start voting for some people that get elected.
It's not just voting for people to get elected. We also have to, hold the Democratic Committee accountable for taking this money away from these down ballot candidates. And we need to do everything we can to find and nurture these people and move them through.
And I mean, you look at this, by starving these local candidates of money, it means that when you're looking for candidates for a little higher level offices that are still relatively low, and then up, like people usually make their way up from a local office and then eventually get up to, Congress. We know some people, we've talked about them on the show, who are working on that or have done that already. So when you don't have these candidates getting the funding that they need, then when you need to run someone for Congress, you don't have any people to run, which is why. You don't have anyone with
experience.
Yeah, and you don't have any qualified candidates that know how to run a campaign or anything. And that's why there's all these seats around the country that go uncontested entirely. Well, also because the Democrats won't fund anyone because they see it as a waste of their money. But it only takes $3,000 to run a local campaign. That's all it takes in most cities. And it's essential for long-term success.
There we go. Go to your municipal elections, find the right people to be voting for, and keep the school boards clean. Keep
public education public.
Keep it away from these people who are trying to profit off of it.
Hold your politicians accountable.
I think that's a good show for us tonight. That one went a little long, and thanks for being with us for episode 32. All right, everyone. Good night.
Thank you for listening. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GreggHoush Show and on Instagram at GreggHoush. If you like what you've heard and want to be a part of it, check out patreon.com/GreggHoush Show. In exchange for funding our programming, you gain access to exclusive content such as uncut editions of our podcast. We have new episodes every Thursday night. We hope you listen in. The GreggHoush Show was created by GreggHoush, executive produced by co-host Eric Gowrays, and co-hosted by Kayla Avery. Other contributors include producer and writer Anna Jeffrey, co-host producer David McGuffin, and writer-engineer Robert Tortora. Theme music for this show was produced and recorded by Geneva de Colbert. Our interns include co-host Casey McLaughlin, writer-engineer Alec Greeny, writer Maddie LoCicero, and associate producer, writer, and announcer William Kennedy. You're listening to New Revolutionary Radio, your call to action.